Under the searing glare of national television, a game show was about to expose the one thing I'd spent my entire life trying to hide. The lights were hotter than I ever imagined. Not just warm, but a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders, baking the cheap polyester of the suit my wife, Clara, had insisted we rent. From our living room couch, everything on Family Feud looked so effortless, so full of laughter and easy money, but standing here, under the glare of 1,000 suns, with the cheerful, booming voice of Steve Harvey echoing in my ears, I felt like an ant under a magnifying glass. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, each beat a reminder of the secret I was desperately trying to keep buried. My family was a beacon of light beside me. Clara, my rock, squeezed my hand every time the camera panned away, her smile a little too tight, but her eyes full of love. My son, 19-year-old Kevin, was bouncing on the balls of his feet, radiating an infectious energy that I wished I could borrow. And then there was Lily, my daughter. At 16, she possessed a quiet intensity that could unnerve a statue. She stood perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the big board, her mind already working, calculating, strategizing. She was the reason we were here. She was the one who had spent months filling out applications, editing our family audition video, and drilling us with practice questions in the evenings. She saw the show as a lifeline, a way to get the money for her college fund, a way to give us a life beyond my paycheck-to-paycheck handyman business, a way to give me a life where I didn't have to come home every night with aching bones and grease permanently etched into the lines of my hands. The first few rounds were a blur. Kevin, bless his heart, hit a couple of big answers. Clara was steady, picking off the middle-tier responses with motherly intuition. The other family, the Parkers, were sharp, and the lead kept changing hands. The tension in the studio was electric. Every right answer was met with a roar from the audience, every wrong answer with a sympathetic, "Oh." For my part, I just tried to look confident. I clapped when we scored. I yelled, good answer," even when I had no idea what the question was. My strategy was simple: stay in the background. Let the others handle the heavy lifting. I was just the smiling, supportive dad, the silent partner. It worked for a while. I managed to avoid the spotlight, but then came the final round before fast money. The score was tight. We were trailing by just 20 points. It all came down to this last face-off. Steve Harvey's voice boomed. "All right, Frank, Kevin, let's go. Top 5 answers are on the board. Whoever gets this, their family gets to play for $20,000. A cold wave of dread washed over me, so intense it nearly buckled my knees. This was my nightmare scenario. Up to the podium. One-on-one. Just me, the other guy, a buzzer, and the big screen. The screen filled with words that, to me, were just a jumble of meaningless shapes, a cruel secret code I had never been taught to crack. All my life I had developed coping mechanisms. I could read a tape measure, a blueprint, the look on a customer's face. I could listen, I could memorize, I could bluff. But I couldn't read. Not a newspaper, not a menu, and certainly not a high-pressure question on a national game show. I stepped up to the podium, my hand hovering over the red button. My palm was so slick with sweat I was afraid it would slide right off. I glanced at Lily. She gave me a small, encouraging nod, but I could see the flicker of worry in her eyes. She knew. Of course she knew. She was the one who would quietly read me the instructions for a new power tool or the fine print on a contract. She never made me feel ashamed, but in that moment her knowledge of my failure felt like another spotlight burning into me. Steve Harvey read the question aloud. We asked 100 people, name something a man might buy to prepare for a romantic evening. My mind went completely blank. The words echoed in my head but didn't connect. Romantic evening? My romantic evenings with Clara usually involved falling asleep on the couch by 9 o'clock. The other contestant, a quick-witted guy named Mark, slammed his buzzer before Steve had even finished the sentence. "Flowers," he shouted. Ding! The number 1 answer lit up the board. The Parkers erupted in cheers. My heart sank into the soles of my rented shoes. They chose to play. My family let out a collective sigh. I had failed the first test. Now, all I had to do was stand there and hope they missed 3 times, giving us a chance to steal. They got the next answer easily. Box of chocolates. Ding. Then, wine. Ding. The Parker family was on a roll. They just needed 1 more to clear the board. But then they stumbled. The dad guessed a new suit. The dreaded red X flashed on the screen, followed by that brutal buzzer sound. Earned. 1 strike. The mom guessed jewelry. Earned. 2 strikes. Their youngest son, looking terrified, guessed, "Reservations." Earned. 3 strikes. Suddenly, the world snapped back into focus. Steve Harvey's voice cut through my panic. "All right, Miller family, here's your chance to steal. You get this, you win the game, you're playing for $20,000. You only need one answer up there. I need to hear from you, Frank." Every head turned to me. The cameras zoomed in. I felt 100 pairs of eyes, 1,000,000 more at home, all waiting. My family looked at me, their faces a mixture of hope and desperation. Clara mouthed, "You can do it." Kevin gave me a thumbs up. Lily just stared, her expression unreadable. Steve leaned in. "Talk to your family, Frank." They huddled around me, whispering frantically. "Candles," Kevin said. "Lingerie," my brother-in-law chimed in from the back. "Music, like a romantic playlist," Clara suggested. They were all good answers, but I couldn't process them. The pressure was a physical force, crushing my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. The letters on the board seemed to mock me, dancing and swimming like angry tadpoles in a pond of white light. I was supposed to be the man of the family, the one they could rely on, and here I was, about to humiliate them on national television. "All right, Frank, gotta have an answer," Steve prompted, his voice gentle but firm. "What'll it be?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My brain was static. I glanced back at the board, a desperate, futile attempt to magically understand. I saw the word flowers and wine. What else? What else goes with that? My mind latched onto the only other thing I could associate with those items. It was stupid. It was nonsensical. But it was the only thought I could form. A vase?" I stammered. The audience let out a confused titter. My family froze. Steve Harvey blinked, his famous mustache twitching in confusion. He tilted his head, playing to the crowd. "A vase? Frank, my man, you buy the flowers, they usually come with a vase. You sure you want to go with vase?" I just nodded dumbly, my face burning with shame. I knew it was wrong. It was a humiliatingly stupid answer. "All right, Frank says a vase," Steve declared, turning to the board. "Is vase up there?" The giant red X and the soul-crushing "earned" were almost a relief. It was over. We'd lost. The Parker family cheered, the audience applauded, and the credits music began to swell. I couldn't look at my family. I just stared at my feet, wishing the floor would swallow me whole. The show went to a commercial break, and the crew started resetting the stage. But Steve Harvey didn't move. He walked over from his podium, his jovial host persona gone. He put a hand on my shoulder, and the weight of it was immense. The studio lights dimmed slightly. "Hey, man," he said, his voice low and serious, meant only for me. "You all right? You froze up there." I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, the shame choking me. "Talk to me, Frank. What happened?" he pressed, his eyes searching mine. And that's when it all came out. The secret I'd guarded for 47 years. The shame I'd carried since I was a little boy in a classroom, staring at a book I couldn't comprehend. I looked up at this man, this celebrity I only knew from a screen, and the truth spilled out in a broken whisper. "I can't read, Mr. Harvey." I couldn't read the question. The world stopped. The low chatter of the crew died down. The air went still. Steve Harvey's face, a landscape of comedic expressions just moments before, became a mask of profound shock and stillness. He didn't say a word. He just stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then he straightened up, turned to the producers in the control booth, and held up his hand in a commanding gesture that silenced the entire studio. "Stop everything," he said, his voice now amplified by the microphone, echoing through the silent space. "Stop the show. Cut the cameras. Everybody just hold on." A wave of confusion rippled through the audience. My family rushed to my side, their faces etched with worry. I felt a hand slip into mine. It was Lily. I finally dared to look at her, expecting to see disappointment, or worse, pity. But that's not what I saw. Her jaw was set. Her eyes, usually so calm and thoughtful, were blazing with a fire I had never seen before. She squeezed my hand, a silent message of support that screamed louder than any crowd. Then she let go. She pulled away from our family huddle, took a deep breath, and started walking. She walked right past me, past her mother, and directly towards the center of the stage, heading straight for Steve Harvey. The stage lights caught her, isolating her in a pool of brilliant white. Every single person in that studio, from the cameraman to the audience members to the rival family, turned to watch her. She stopped a few feet from Steve, her small frame radiating an astonishing amount of courage, and I could see her lips begin to move. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the cavernous studio with the clarity of a bell. It was steady, devoid of the teenage tremor I might have expected. It was the same voice she used when she was explaining a complex math problem to me, patient and certain. "Mr. Harvey," she began, and every eye, every camera lens pivoted to her. "My name is Lily Miller. That man," she said, pointing at me, her finger not wavering for an instant, "is my father, Frank Miller, and he is the smartest man I know." A ripple of murmurs went through the audience. I felt my wife Clara grip my arm, her nails digging into my sleeve. I wanted to tell Lily to stop, to come back, to not draw any more attention to my failing. But I was frozen, mesmerized by the fierce loyalty radiating from my child. Steve Harvey watched her, his expression unreadable. He didn't interrupt. He gave her the stage. "My dad can't read," she said, the words blunt and honest, leaving no room for whispers or speculation. "He never learned. He grew up poor, had to leave school when he was a kid to help support his family. He spent his entire life working with his hands, fixing things other people have broken. He can take apart a car engine and put it back together blindfolded. He can build a house from the ground up. He can tell you what's wrong with your plumbing just by the sound it makes." She took a step closer to him, her gaze locked with his. "He can't read words on a page, Mr. Harvey, but he can read people. He can read a room. He can read worry in my mom's eyes from 100 feet away and know exactly what to do to make it better. He taught my brother how to be a good man, and he taught me that intelligence isn't about what you know from a book. It's about what you do with the heart and the mind you're given." Tears were streaming down Clara's face now, silent and proud. Kevin stood beside me, his jaw clenched, looking at his sister with a kind of awe. I felt a hot, thick lump form in my throat, a mix of profound shame and a love so fierce it physically hurt. She was defending me, not just making an excuse for me. She was reframing my entire life, my entire identity, in front of millions of strangers. "We didn't come here because we thought it would be fun," Lily continued, her voice gaining strength. "We came here because my dad works 16-hour days to keep a roof over our heads, and I want to go to college so I can help him, so he doesn't have to break his back for the rest of his life. That $20,000 isn't a prize to us. It's a chance my dad has earned 1,000 times over." The studio was dead silent. You could have heard a feather drop. The Parker family, our opponents, were no longer smiling about their victory. They were watching Lily, their faces filled with a new kind of understanding. Steve Harvey finally moved. He slowly nodded his head, his eyes glistening. He looked over at me, and for the first time I didn't see a game show host. I saw a man who understood struggle, who understood sacrifice. "So I'm asking you, Mr. Harvey," Lily said, her voice dropping to a plea, but still full of steel. "Don't end the game like this. My dad didn't get the same chance as the other player. He couldn't read the board. Please, give our family a chance to steal. Give him a chance." The audience, as if on some invisible cue, began to applaud. It started with a few people, then grew into a wave of thunderous, sustained applause that shook the whole studio. They weren't clapping for a game anymore. They were clapping for my daughter, for me. Steve Harvey held up a hand, silencing the crowd. He looked deeply moved, conflicted. He opened his mouth to speak, and I held my breath, every fiber of my being praying. This was it, the moment that could change everything. But before he could say a word, a man in a sharp suit and a headset marched onto the stage from the wings. He moved with an impatient, brisk energy that immediately shattered the emotional bubble Lily had created. He didn't look at Lily or my family. He went straight to Steve Harvey and spoke in a low, sharp tone that the front rows could probably hear. "Steve, we're live to tape. We can't do this. The round is over. The rules are the rules. The Parkers won. We have to finish the show and get to fast money." Steve didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on Lily. The producer touched Steve's arm. "Steve, now." Steve Harvey slowly turned his head to face the producer. He looked from the man's cold, impassive face back to my daughter's, which was filled with desperate hope. He then looked over at me, standing there broken and exposed. A long, agonizing second passed. The entire studio, the entire world, seemed to shrink down to the space between these three people on the stage. He took a deep breath and his expression hardened, settling into a look of resolute determination I had never seen on him before. He turned back to the producer, leaning into his personal space, and his voice, though not a shout, was a low growl that carried the weight of absolute authority. "Get your hand off my arm," he said, "and get off my stage." The producer recoiled as if he'd been burned. His face, a mask of corporate stoicism moments before, twisted into a mixture of shock and indignation. He opened his mouth to protest, to assert his authority, but Steve Harvey wasn't finished. Steve took the microphone from its stand, with a deliberate, almost theatrical slowness. The simple action was a declaration. This was his show, his stage, his decision. "Let me make something clear to everybody," he said, his voice booming through the speakers, no longer the folksy host, but a commanding presence. He wasn't just talking to the producer anymore. He was addressing the control room, the network executives, and everyone in that audience. "I've been hosting this show for a long time. We've seen people win, we've seen people lose, we've laughed, we've had a good time. But what we don't do on Family Feud is penalize a man for the circumstances of his life." He turned and pointed at me, not with accusation, but with respect. This man, Frank Miller, stood on this stage at a disadvantage none of us knew about. And instead of crumbling, he raised a daughter with the courage of a lioness to stand up for him. He then turned his gaze to Lily, and his expression softened, pride welling in his eyes. "Young lady, you are a testament to your father. Don't you ever forget that." Lily's composure finally cracked. A single tear traced a path down her cheek, but she stood her ground, nodding her thanks. "Now," Steve continued, his voice hardening again as he addressed the invisible powers that be, "I don't care what the rules are. The rules are made for a fair game. This wasn't fair, so we're going to make it fair. Right now." He strode over to the Parker family, who looked on with wide, uncertain eyes. "Folks," he said to them, his tone shifting back to something more gentle, "you all won that round according to the book. I'm not taking that away from you, but I hope you have it in your hearts to understand what's happening here." The father, Mark, the man who had beaten me to the buzzer, stepped forward immediately. "Mr. Harvey," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "what that young lady said, what her father is going through, that's more important than any game. Of course, they should have another chance." His family all nodded in vigorous agreement, some of them wiping tears from their own eyes. The audience roared its approval, a unified wave of sound that was part cheer, part collective sigh of relief. The producer, who had been hovering by the edge of the stage, threw his hands up in defeat and stalked off, headset askew. It was clear who was in charge. "All right then," Steve announced, his energy returning. "That's what I'm talking about. That's the America I know. Let's clear the board. Millers, you're up. The question is the same. Name something a man might buy to prepare for a romantic evening." We still need one answer to steal and win the game. The crew, galvanized by the drama, scrambled to reset the board. The big red X's from our previous failed attempt vanished. My family huddled around me again, but this time the energy was completely different. It wasn't frantic or desperate. It was focused, determined, a single unit bound together by Lily's courage. "Okay, Dad," Kevin whispered, his voice shaking with excitement. "Candles. Just say candles. It's got to be on there." "Or music," Clara added, squeezing my arm. "A romantic CD or something." But Lily was quiet. She looked at me, and I saw her mind working, a silent communication passing between us that no one else could understand. She knew that just giving me a word wouldn't solve the core problem. The pressure, the lights, the jumble of my thoughts, I could still freeze. I could still misremember. Steve Harvey must have seen it too. He walked over to our huddle. "Frank," he said, putting a comforting hand on my shoulder, "don't listen to them." He gestured to my family, who looked at him in surprise. "Listen to me. I'm going to help you. I'm not going to read the answers on the board. I want you to close your eyes, just for a second. Forget the cameras, forget the audience, forget everything." I did as he said. I closed my eyes, and the blinding glare of the lights was replaced by a soothing darkness. "Now, Frank." Steve's voice was low, intimate, like a friend sharing a secret. "You're a married man. You love your wife, right?" "More than anything," I whispered, the words coming easily without the pressure of the crowd. "I want you to think about a time you did something special for her," he said. "Not something fancy, just something from the heart. You're setting up a nice evening at home. You've got the flowers Mark talked about. You've got the wine. What else is in that room, Frank? What did you do to make it special for Clara?" His words painted a picture. Suddenly, I wasn't on a game show stage anymore. I was back in our small living room 20 years ago. It was our 5th anniversary. I'd been paid for a big contracting job, and for the first time, we had a little extra money. Kevin and Lily were toddlers, asleep in their beds. I'd bought Clara a cheap bouquet of carnations and a bottle of sparkling grape juice because we couldn't afford champagne. I remember spreading our best tablecloth, the one we only used for Christmas, on the coffee table. And then, what else? What did I do? The memory surfaced, clear as day. I remembered pulling the box down from the hall closet. I remembered the scent of cinnamon and vanilla. I remembered striking the match and watching the little flame dance to life, casting a warm, flickering glow across Clara's smiling face. I opened my eyes. I looked at Steve Harvey, and I knew the answer. It wasn't just a word fed to me by my son. It was my own. A real memory. A real piece of my life. Candles, I said. My voice didn't waver. It was clear and certain. Steve Harvey beamed, a smile so wide it looked like it could power the whole studio. Frank Miller says, "Candles," he bellowed, turning to the board. "Is it up there?" The world seemed to move in slow motion as we all watched the blank space on the board. A slot began to flip, the familiar sound of the turning letters filling the air. It turned, and then it stopped. Ding! The word candles appeared in bright, beautiful letters. And next to it, the number, 18. 18 people had said candles. It was the number 2 answer. We had done it. We had won. The studio exploded. The noise was deafening. My family enveloped me in a group hug so tight I thought my ribs would crack. Clara was sobbing and laughing at the same time, kissing my face. Kevin was pounding my back, yelling, "You did it, Dad! You did it!" Lily just held on to me, her face buried in my chest, and I could feel her whole body shaking with relief. I held her tight, stroking her hair, my own tears finally breaking free and mixing with hers. Over her shoulder I saw Steve Harvey, standing off to the side, just watching us with a look of profound satisfaction. He caught my eye and gave me a slow, respectful nod. After the celebration died down, he guided a still reeling Kevin and me over to the fast money podiums. I was in a daze. I barely remember the questions he asked me. My mind was still replaying Lily's speech, the sound of the winning bell, the feeling of my family's arms around me. I gave answers, simple, one-word responses that popped into my head. When my 20 seconds were up, I had scored 112 points. Not great, but not terrible. It was all up to Kevin now. As Kevin took his place, I stood with the rest of the family, my arm draped around Lily. "You were so brave," I whispered into her hair. "I've never been prouder of you." She just squeezed my hand. Kevin was a powerhouse. He was quick, confident, and the answers flew out of his mouth. 100. A car. The morning. He was a natural. When his time was up, Steve started revealing his points. Survey said 40. Ding. Survey said 22. Ding. Survey said 30. Ding. The points were racking up. The tension was unbearable. We needed 88 points from Kevin to win the $20,000. He had already scored 92. But we didn't know that yet. It all came down to the final answer. "Kevin," Steve said, drawing out the moment, "you needed 88 points. For $20,000, the survey said." He paused, his eyes twinkling. The audience was screaming. And then every light in the studio went out. Plunging into absolute darkness, the studio gasped as one. The joyful, high-tension squeal of the audience was choked off, replaced by a wave of confused murmurs. The only light was the faint, eerie green glow of the emergency exit signs high on the walls. For a split second, I thought it was part of the show, a dramatic effect to heighten the suspense. But the silence from the stage, the lack of a booming "We'll be right back" from Steve, told me this was real. Something was wrong. My arm tightened around Lily, pulling her closer. "Everyone okay?" I called out to Clara and Kevin, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the semi-darkness. "We're here, Frank," Clara's voice came back, shaky but close. "Kevin, I'm here." "Whoa, that was weird," Kevin said, his voice coming from the direction of the fast money podium. The murmuring in the audience grew louder, a mixture of anxiety and excitement. Then a single, authoritative voice cut through the noise. It was Steve Harvey. "Everybody stay calm. Just a little technical difficulty, folks. We'll have the lights back on in just a second. Nobody move, please." His voice, even without the amplification of the main speakers, was a powerful, reassuring presence. Backup generators must have kicked in, because a few seconds later, a low humming started, and a set of dim work lights flickered on, bathing the stage in a stark, flat light. It was nothing like the warm, glamorous glow of the show. It looked like a warehouse. The magic was gone. Stagehands with flashlights began moving through the set, their voices a low buzz of technical jargon. In the strange, clinical light, I could see Steve talking animatedly with the producer who had tried to get him off the stage earlier. The producer was gesturing wildly towards the control booth and then at us. Steve just stood his ground, arms crossed, shaking his head. Their argument was silent from where we stood, but the body language was clear. The producer was angry, insistent. Steve was immovable. Finally, Steve turned his back on the man and walked over to us. "Frank, family," he said, his voice low and serious. "Looks like we blew a main breaker. They're telling me it could be a while. A big while." "So, what does that mean?" Clara asked, her hand clutching my arm. "For the game?" Steve sighed, running a hand over his head. "Well, normally they'd get the audience out of here, fix the problem, and we'd finish taping tomorrow or something, but—" He trailed off, looking over his shoulder at the producer, who was now staring at us with a look of pure frustration. "But what, Mr. Harvey?" Lily asked, her voice quiet. He looked back at us, his face grim. "The network guy," he said, nodding towards the producer, "is saying that because the final answer wasn't officially revealed, the game isn't technically complete. He's saying that due to the extraordinary circumstances." He made air quotes with his fingers. "He wants to declare the round null and void." "Null and void?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. "What does that mean?" "It means we lose?" Kevin asked, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Just like that? After everything?" "He's arguing that the integrity of the broadcast was compromised," Steve explained, his disgust evident. "He's talking about the unscheduled stop, my little speech, the power outage. He's trying to find a loophole in the contract to just erase this entire episode. Says it's unusable for broadcast. The world tilted on its axis. To go from the highest high, the vindication, the victory, the sheer, unbelievable relief to this, to have it all snatched away by a man in a suit with a rule book. It was a cruelty I couldn't comprehend. All that emotion, Lily's bravery, the entire studio rallying behind us, for nothing. We'd be sent home with our consolation prizes and a story no one would ever see. The $20,000, the lifeline for Lily's future, would vanish as if it had never existed. I looked at Lily. Her face was pale in the dim light. The fire I had seen in her eyes earlier was gone, replaced by a glassy look of shock and devastation. She had put herself on the line, exposed our family's most painful secret to the world, all for a chance that was now being stolen by a technicality. The weight of her disappointment was heavier than any shame I had ever felt. "That's not right," I said, my voice a low growl. The fear and shame that had paralyzed me earlier were gone, burned away and replaced by a cold, hard anger. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," Steve agreed, his eyes fixed on me, "and I'm not going to let it happen." He turned and walked back towards the producer, who saw him coming and braced himself. This time, there was no quiet conversation. Steve pointed a finger right in the man's chest. "You are not going to do this to that family," Steve's voice echoed in the quiet studio. "I will walk out of the studio right now. I will go on every talk show, every news program, and I will tell the world how your network treated a good man who couldn't read, and the daughter who fought for him. You think a compromised broadcast is a PR problem? Try me." The producer paled. He looked around at the crew, who were all watching, silent and wide-eyed. He looked at the audience, who, though they couldn't hear the specifics, understood the conflict. He looked at us, a family standing on the edge of a dream, and then back at the superstar host who was threatening to blow up his own show. The man was trapped. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He pulled out his phone, typed a frantic text, and then held it to his ear. After a few tense seconds of listening, he nodded, looking defeated. He lowered the phone and spoke to Steve in a clipped, resentful tone. "Fine, but the final reveal has to be done properly. We need the main lights, the sound effects, everything. The board is frozen with the final score. We can't touch it. But we can't fix the grid with the audience in here. It's a safety issue. We have to clear the building." "So what's the solution?" Steve demanded. "The solution is we send everyone home," the producer said. "Your family, the Parkers, the audience. We'll fly you all back out here when the studio is repaired. Could be a week. Could be a month. We'll retape the final reveal then." A month? My heart sank. A month of waiting, of not knowing. A month of putting our lives on hold. Of my handyman business suffering while I waited for a phone call. It felt like another form of punishment. But before I could even process it, Clara spoke up. "Excuse me," she said, her voice polite but firm. She had been quiet until now, a pillar of silent support. But I knew this tone. This was the voice she used when a store tried to overcharge her or a teacher was being unfair to one of the kids. It was the voice of a mother who had reached her limit. She walked right up to the producer, who looked down at her, surprised. "You want to send us all home and fly us back in a month, is that it?" "It's the only way to adhere to regulations and proper procedure, Mom," the producer said stiffly. "Okay," Clara said with a nod. "And I assume the network will be compensating my husband for his lost wages for the weeks he'll be waiting around, and for the jobs he'll have to cancel to fly back here on a moment's notice, because his customers can't wait a month to get their pipes fixed." The producer blinked. "Well, no. Our obligation is to cover flights and hotels for the taping itself." "I see," Clara said, her voice dripping with ice. "So your procedure is going to cost my family money we don't have. You're going to make us choose between paying our mortgage and finding out if we've won the money that could change our daughter's life." She took a breath. "No, I don't think so. There's another way." Everyone looked at her. Steve Harvey had a slow smile spreading across his face. "Go on, Mrs. Miller," he encouraged. "The board has the final score, right?" she asked the producer. "It's locked in?" "Yes," the producer admitted, wary. "And you have a camera that works?" she asked, pointing to a cameraman who was holding a smaller, portable camera. The cameraman nodded. "Then you don't need a whole studio," Clara declared, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "You don't need an audience, you just need the board, our family, and Mr. Harvey." She turned to Steve. "Turn on that board. Right now, just tell us. Tell us if my son won the money for his sister." The producer started to sputter. "That's completely unorthodox. It's not how we do things." But Steve Harvey was already nodding, a look of immense admiration on his face. "I think," he said, his voice resonating with finality, "that is a damn fine idea." He turned to a nearby technician. "Can you power up just the board and the sound effect for the reveal? Nothing else?" The technician, a young woman with a headset, looked nervously at the producer, who just stared in disbelief and then back at Steve. She gave a hesitant nod. I think so. I can bypass the main grid and run it off the backup." "Then do it," Steve commanded. He looked back at us, his eyes shining in the dim light. "Miller family, you've waited long enough." He strode back to the fast money podium, taking his position. "Kevin, get back up here." Kevin, looking like he'd just been called into the principal's office, scurried back to his spot. We huddled together, Clara, Lily, and I, gripping each other's hands so tightly our knuckles were white. The technician fiddled with a panel, and with a low hum, the giant game board flickered to life, its familiar colors a beacon in the gloom. The final, unrevealed answer was just a blank space. The score read 112-200. The studio was silent, save for the hum of the board. The producer stood defeated. The crew watched, spellbound. The Parker family, who had been standing by respectfully, leaned forward in anticipation. This was it. No audience, no glamour, just a family and a screen that held their future. Steve Harvey took a deep, dramatic breath, looking directly into the lens of the single working camera. "Kevin," he said, his voice a powerful whisper that seemed to fill the entire space. "I asked you to name something you do in the morning. You said wake up. Your family needs 88 points to win $20,000. I'm telling you right now, you already got it. But let's see how many points you got. For the win, the survey said." He paused, a master of his craft even under these bizarre circumstances. The blank space on the board began to flip. The sound effect, tinny and strange without the full speaker system, echoed in the silent studio. It felt like an eternity. Our hearts were in our throats. The letters stopped. And then, nothing. The board showed the word, wake up. But the space for the number remained stubbornly blank. The winning ding never came. A low, confused murmur went through the handful of crew still on stage. Steve stared at the board, his smile faltering. "What the hell?" he muttered. The technician from before ran up to him, whispering frantically in his ear. Steve's eyes widened. He shook his head in disbelief, then looked over at us, his face a mask of utter shock. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. "Folks," he said, his voice unsteady for the first time, I don't know how to tell you this." He pointed a trembling finger at the board. "There's been a glitch. A once-in-a-million kind of glitch. The score Kevin got for that last answer, it's not a number." "Not a number?" I echoed, the words making no sense. "What do you mean, it's not a number?" The wave of hope that had surged through me just moments ago crashed into a wall of pure confusion. Beside me, Clara and Lily were just as bewildered. Steve Harvey looked like he was struggling to find the words. He took a step back from the podium, gesturing for the technician to come forward. "Show them," he said, his voice strained. "Show them what you showed me." The young woman, looking terrified to be the center of attention, typed something into a keypad connected to the game board. The screen flickered. The word "wake up" remained, but where the two-digit score should have been, a single, impossible symbol now glowed. An infinity sign. For a moment, we all just stared, completely dumbfounded. The infinity symbol. It wasn't a glitch that produced a random character or a jumble of pixels. It was a perfect, elegant, sideways figure. 8. It was a mathematical concept, not a survey result. "What is that?" Kevin asked, his voice a squeak. "Is that a joke?" The producer, seeing his chance to regain control, marched forward. "See? This is exactly what I was talking about," he snapped, pointing at the board. "The system is completely corrupted. This entire taping is a wash. We have to scrap it. There's no valid result here." But Steve Harvey held up a hand, silencing him without a look. "Hold on a minute," Steve said. His eyes narrowed in thought as he stared at the impossible symbol. He looked at the technician. "You said you've never seen this before." "Never," she confirmed, shaking her head. "The system is only programmed to display numbers between 0 and 100. This shouldn't be possible. It's like the power surge and the reboot created some kind of impossible data point." "Impossible," Steve repeated softly, a strange smile playing on his lips. "I don't know about that." He turned to us, his eyes alight with an idea. "Frank," he said, his voice regaining its familiar warmth and showmanship. "Earlier tonight your daughter stood up here and told us that you're the smartest man she knows. She said you can read things that aren't in books. I want you to read this for me. What does that symbol mean to you?" He was asking me, the man who couldn't read. He wanted my interpretation of a computer glitch that was baffling his own crew. The pressure should have been immense, but it wasn't. After everything we'd been through, this felt different. It felt like a puzzle, and puzzles were something I understood. I looked at the glowing symbol. Infinity. I didn't know much from books, but I knew what it meant. Endless. Forever. Without limits. I thought about the question. Name something you do in the morning. And Kevin's answer. Wake up. And then I thought about my own life. Every single morning for 47 years, I had woken up with the secret of my illiteracy, the shame of it, a heavy blanket. Every morning I had gotten out of bed and gone to work, faced a world full of words I couldn't understand, and somehow I'd made my way. I'd provided for my family. I'd built a life. It was a struggle that never ended, an infinite struggle. But then I looked at my family. I looked at Clara, whose love had been my constant anchor. I looked at Kevin, whose quick mind and easy confidence were everything I'd hoped for in a son. And I looked at Lily, my brave, brilliant Lily, who had seen past my limitations and only saw my strength. She was my legacy. She was the one who would break the cycle. The love I felt for them, the hope I had for her future. That felt infinite, too. It means... I started, my voice hoarse. I cleared my throat and spoke again, louder this time, my words echoing in the silent studio. It means that for some people, just waking up every morning and facing the day is the biggest win there is. It's a struggle that never ends. But it also means that the love you have for your family, the hope you have for your kids, that never ends either. It's limitless. The studio was absolutely still. I had spoken from the heart, with no idea if it was the right answer. But when I looked at Steve Harvey, he had tears in his eyes. He was nodding slowly, a look of profound understanding on his face. "That's the best damn answer I've ever heard on this show," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He turned to the stunned producer. "You hear that? You want to talk about a compromised broadcast? This is the most real moment we have ever filmed. And you want to erase it?" He scoffed. "No, we're not erasing anything, and we're not waiting a month to finish this." He walked over to the Parker family. "Mark," he said, "you're a good man. Your family is going home with the $5 a point you earned. But I gotta ask you, what do you think that board is trying to tell us?" Mark the dad didn't hesitate. "It's telling us they won, Mr. Harvey. It's telling us they won it all." "I agree," Steve said. He turned and faced the single camera, as if addressing the entire world. "There's no number on that board. So as the host and executive producer of this show, I'm making a decision. When a number isn't enough to measure a family's heart, you have to do something different." He walked over to us, placing a hand on my shoulder and one on Lily's. "The Miller family isn't walking out of here with $20,000. My heart fell. A final, gut-wrenching plummet. "After all this, they're walking out of here with the grand prize, doubled." The words hung in the air, unbelievable. $40,000. Dollars, he enunciated, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. The producer's jaw dropped. Steve, you can't. The prize fund, the insurance. Send me the bill, Steve boomed, cutting him off. I'll pay for it myself. This family has earned it. He looked at me, at my tear-streaked face, at my wife, who was openly sobbing, at my son who was staring in disbelief, at my daughter who looked like the weight of the world had just been lifted from her shoulders. Frank, you go home and you hold your head high. You're a damn good father. And Lily, he said, turning to her, you go to any college you want. You send me the application, I'll write the recommendation letter myself. And then, for the first time that night, I didn't feel shame. I didn't feel fear. I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling of worthiness that had nothing to do with reading words and everything to do with the family standing beside me. Lily launched herself into my arms, hugging me with all her might. I love you, Dad, she cried into my shoulder. I love you too, sweet pea, I whispered back, my voice finally breaking completely. More than words can say. We never saw that episode on TV. The network, true to the producer's word, deemed it unusable. But the story got out. A crew member leaked it. It went viral. People called it the Infinity episode. Our story was told on the news, in magazines. Donations poured in for Lily's college fund, far exceeding the prize money. I was offered a spot in an adult literacy program, sponsored by a local charity. And for the first time in my life, I accepted the help. It's been a year now. I'm sitting here, reading a bedtime story to my grandson. The words are still slow, still a challenge, but they're mine. I can see them, and I can understand them. Lily is in her first year of university, studying to be a teacher. Every night she calls to tell us what she's learning. And every time I hang up the phone, I think about that night. I think about the lights, the shame, the impossible symbol on the board, and the man who saw beyond the rules of a game and recognized the heart of a family. We went on that show, hoping to win some money. We walked away with something infinitely more valuable. We walked away with our truth.